Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Kate, you're also following these state house elections in Virginia. What's your sense of other arguments that the candidates are making or themes that are emerging from the Republican or Democratic camps?
Earlier this fall, I spent a couple days driving around the state talking to some of the candidates and getting a sense of the races. Let me start with what I think makes this an uphill fight for Republicans. They've got to flip 2 seats in the Senate to take control. The lieutenant governor was the tiebreaker. Midterm year, governors tend to lose seats in the midterms, especially GOP governors in these purple or even blue states. The GOP hasn't held full control of the governorship in both chambers for a decade, and Virginia's politics have not gotten more friendly to Republicans since then. But most of all, you have to ruin several really, really contested districts. Some of these districts, suburban Richmond, Hampton Roads in the south of the state, are really some of the most contested political territory in the country. So these are close races. Democrats are pouring money into these races. President Biden has woken up and realized that there's some risk here of Youngkin winning. So he and the party are going to put up a lot of money. But then let's talk about some things that are in the GOP's favor. And that goes back to your question about what the candidates are talking about. The candidates are talking exclusively about 3 things, and that's a better economy, education, and public safety and crime. So these are really the only themes that any of the candidates are really hitting. And I think Youngkin has supported that strategy of focusing on a few potent themes that attract a big tent of voters in our top voter minds. So Alicia was talking about Monty Mason from the Williamsburg Peninsula blocking his repeal of the electric car mandate. Well, there have been other cases of Democrats kind of blocking his agenda. He wants to cut the corporate tax rate, trim the personal income tax rate. Youngkin wants to pass a bill basically putting someone in jail if somebody you deal fentanyl to dies. Some of his priorities like this have just been blocked by the state Senate. So they're taking this out on the road. The Republicans are saying, look, if you like Youngkin and he's got this great favorability rating, well, then you need to give him the state Senate so that we can pass some of Youngkin's priorities. So again, too, another thing to think about is that there are lots of seats that are open because of redistricting and some retirements. And you also have a Republican governor who is not only popular, but he is really making a play for these seats and going on bus tours around the state and stuff to try to win votes. And he's also using a pretty sophisticated early voting machine to try to narrow the Democratic advantage in early voting. In Virginia, there's a permanent absentee ballot list, and once you're signed up on it, you're on it forever. Democrats have traditionally been much better at getting folks on that list. So Youngkin's been out there saying Republicans may not like early voting or think that the election should work that way, but this is the system we have. And so we need to vote early and get people to vote. So that's kind of a lay of the land there, but I think it is a really tough race for Youngkin to flip, and I think seats 20 and might be Loudoun County, where the Republicans are running a guy named Juan Pablo Segura, or in suburban Richmond, really the heart of the types of voters that Republicans have been losing, suburban women in particular. Suburban Richmond, the GOP has an incumbent named Siobhan Dunavant, who's very moderate and might be a good profile for the district, but it's still, nonetheless, those are kind of 2 races to watch on election night to see if Republicans are going to pull this out. But it's still, like I said, I think it's a fundamentally tough uphill fight for Youngkin.
Kate, you mentioned Youngkin's impressive approval rating, and I saw one poll saying it has hit a new record. This is from Christopher Newport University. Do you approve or disapprove of the way Glenn Youngkin is handling his job as governor of Virginia? Across the state, it's 55 approved to 36 disapprove, which is an amazing number for a Republican in Virginia, which has trended blue, particularly in the last several years. The growth of the northern Virginia suburbs, a lot of government workers in those areas. But even if you break it down further than that, Youngkin approval, 93% among Republicans, 61% among independents, 18% Democrats, 56% among men, 54% among women, 62% among white voters, 34% among black voters, not a traditional Republican Party constituency, at least in recent years. And so, Kate, what do you make of these numbers? Is it just that Glenn Youngkin is talking about issues in a different way than other Republicans are, in a less confrontational, a less aggressive way, perhaps, than, to take a contrast, Ron DeSantis in Florida, who talks about how Florida is where woke goes to die, and speaks in a way that, to my eye, is not the kind of rhetoric that necessarily attracts swing voters, independents, and moderates. And is there a chance here that if Glenn Youngkin manages to put up an impressive showing in these elections next month, that this could power him into the 2024 presidential race? It seems to me that he will not have a lot of time to make up his mind there. Some of these filing deadlines are already coming, and to get on the New Hampshire presidential ballot, my understanding is you're supposed to have your paperwork in by next Friday. So that is obviously before we will get any results from Virginia.
Right. So when I was following some of these races a little more closely early this fall, I went to a couple town halls that Youngkin did. He's running these Parents Matter town halls where he goes to local areas and has these kind of group conversations with parents about education issues in particular, but as well other economic issues like vocational training and such. And to your point, the tenor of them really is different than a traditional political event. And he does not take that combative edge that some other Republican politicians do. He doesn't duck the culture wars. At one of these town halls, he was touting that he signed a bill that had stiffer age verification requirements for pornography websites. And this was an applause line. This was something that clearly suburban parents on both parts of the political spectrum were enthusiastic about. Same for banning TikTok or making it harder to access for teenagers. He's choosing issues that do have some real cross-party appeal and are broadly popular. And he's doing so in a way that's less combative. And also his pitch on education generally, he talks a lot about parents having both rights and responsibilities, and that part of his thinking in overhauling education standards is building citizens for the United States who are informed about our founding and who are prepared for the responsibilities of self-government. So again, that is a foundational good line, and it's not the kind that alienates voters that Republicans need to win. Now, I would say this, of course, leads to the next question you asked, which is, does he have any juice for 2024, especially as these state filing deadlines loom so closely? I think this would be obviously an optimistic candidate who is intent on running a big tent party should be attractive to Republican voters and is certainly attractive to some donors who are looking at this current primary, not seeing a lot of great options for where to put their money. But also, Kyle, I mean, running a national campaign is tougher. You'd have Donald Trump attacking you every day of the week. You'd have to have views on all sorts of issues. It's looking like we are going to have more of a national security election after the brutal attack in Israel. So there is a question about what Youngkin's fixed worldview is, how he would present himself to voters. So I think it is certainly something Republicans ought to think about, but it's not a layup either, especially this late in the cycle.
Finally, let's do an update on the House of Representatives, but it doesn't turn out to be much of an update. Jim Jordan, after two unsuccessful speaker votes, pulled a third attempt today and is throwing his support behind the idea of empowering the acting Speaker, Patrick McHenry. As we tape this, Republicans are in a meeting trying to figure out whether they have the votes in order to do that. But let's start with a clip from one of the opponents. This is Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene.
I do not support this plan. Republican voters worked too hard to give us the majority for us to enter some sort of temporary speakership. Our conference has a responsibility to the American people, to our districts, to work together and unify. And this conference is absolutely broken.
Alicia, I guess I don't see why empowering Patrick McHenry would be a loss for Republicans. He is a Republican. He's a respected Republican. And if Republicans need Democratic votes in order to make that change, the Democrats are going to want some sort of concession. But it seems to me if Republicans have 218 votes to do it on their own, I don't see why Republicans would oppose that on the grounds that it's a loss for the GOP.
Seems like they just want chaos and gridlock because they don't want to get anything to get done. And I guess it's just a cynical suspicion is that they don't want to pass or be forced to vote on some kind of Ukraine aid bill because they oppose this. And so maybe they're trying to just hold everything up over that. Kate may have some more deeper thoughts on that.
Kate, it just seems to me that the Republicans, by failing for 2 weeks now to have an operational House of Representatives, are only making the Democratic argument against their majority for 2024. And who knows how long this can continue. Maybe we will get acting Speaker Patrick McHenry having some power to bring government funding bills or something like that soon, or maybe not. We'll have to wait to find out. But even just in these elections in Virginia coming up, I can see how this might be something Democratic candidates would want to talk about. When the House was on the verge of not passing government funding recently and going into a shutdown, that is something that really affects government workers in Northern Virginia. You hear the argument from Republicans sometimes that who cares, shut down the government, most Americans won't notice. Well, they will notice in the state that's having the election where Glenn Youngkin is trying to get a big win next month.
Yeah, I mean, remember, I was talking about one of the decisive seats being Loudoun County in Northern Virginia. That's a seat in a district that Biden carried that Republicans are trying to pick up. And it's not out of reach necessarily, but I don't think a shutdown would help, to your point. But yes, always good to give the listeners an update on the GOAT rodeo now more than 2 weeks into it. I would just note here that I'm not seeing anything that emerges here that is an improvement over Speaker McCarthy. I would note there doesn't appear to be a majority or enough 218 Republican support to empower Patrick McHenry with these kind of caretaker abilities as a temporary Speaker of the House. And even if there were, this idea that he's going to negotiate a spending deal with Democrats that's going to be better than what McCarthy negotiated over the summer with Biden, it just looks incredibly unlikely to me, given that he would be, by definition, a weak temporary speaker, even if they try to empower him with some of this temporary authority. So it's looking to me like nothing will be accomplished here. And of course, we are now have a live crisis in the Middle East that could escalate into a wider regional conflict. And you have Republicans who can't elect a speaker, look completely distracted and unable to function and not pass anything. So I think, unfortunately, this is going to continue until some folks come to their senses. But maybe Speaker McCarthy is where we end back up, is my joke, because I don't see anything emerging that's an improvement over that.
Thank you, Kate and Alicia. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.